Hi and welcome to Teach Start. This is the first of hopefully many videos that we're going to put out every single day at 5 p.m. UK time. So the purpose of these videos is to talk through really bits of teaching that might be useful to you. I'm going to title these videos so that you can pick out the videos that are useful to you, or you might want to just look at all the videos. And if you do want to look at all the videos, then click subscribe, and if you enjoy this video, if you find it useful, then click like. If you disagree with anything in this video, please feel free to add comments at the bottom, or if you agree to it, add comments at the bottom. The layout of your classroom and where your tables physically are is probably the first thing to consider. Now, some of you watching this, you will not be able to change it. For example, if you share the classroom with someone else, if you're constantly moving from class to class, which is true for a lot of people, if you're in a science room that you can't physically move the desks, and there's loads of other reasons why you can't change them. So this is a list of the most typical layouts of classrooms. This won't cover every single eventuality. There's some really creative ones I've seen in my experience in the schools I've worked with. However, these are the most common one. So number one is rows, where you just have 4 or 5 rows across the room, and I'm sure there's a graphic coming up now in case you can't imagine it. The advantage of this is that everyone's sitting near enough someone else, in fact many people, so they can discuss their work, and obviously if you have group work they're near people. Something you can do is for group work as well is if you've got 4 rows, then the people on the first and third row can turn around and do group work with the people on the second and fourth row. So it works quite nicely for that. It's quite easy to get around as a teacher. However, when the rows are 4 long rows or 5 long rows or 3 long rows, it's very difficult to get to the middle section. Like you've got a bit that you can't get to easily as a teacher. The second thing to consider when it comes to layout of your classroom is grouping the tables. So there's loads of different ways you can do this. You can do this in 4s or 6s, or any other permutation of 2 if you've got desks that seat 2 people. Now the advantage of this is it's great for group work. So if you're a teacher who knows you're going to be doing a lot of group work, a lot of discussion, then it's absolutely brilliant for that. It's also really good for the teacher to walk around the room. It's much easier to walk around the room because the tables are grouped together. There's a lot of space between the tables normally. If you have a behaviour system that relies on teams rather than individuals for rewards and sometimes sanctions, it's very good for that because they're built as a team. The other time I've seen it really work well is a class that had 4 or 5 really difficult characters in, and the teacher put the tables into groups to split those students up. So that you kind of have your own little class in that cluster of maybe 6 students, rather than having them all together in say rows. So there's some advantages to it. The disadvantages are that normally there's quite a few students who aren't fully on you as a teacher. With rows, they're facing towards you, everyone's facing towards you. So if you're a very chalk and talk teacher, if you're always working from the front, and you don't do much group work, then there's not really any advantage to doing group tables. Now, there's a lot of people who would say that as teachers, we really shouldn't be teaching from the front anymore. I think trends come and go. I think that obviously, like everything I'm going to say on this channel, everything's good in moderation. I don't think there's any strategy that if you go all out with, it's very good. The third type is individual desks. Now, individual desks is like exam conditions, where you have 2 people on each desk and they're separated by a row, they're separated by an aisle, and everyone is sitting next to one other person, and then that's it. This is really good for exams because what you do with the exams, even quizzes inside class, is you move one of the people on the desks round into the aisle, and then that separates everyone. It's very difficult to accidentally look at other people's work. So there's some advantages to it. The disadvantage is that it really doesn't promote much discussion. If the person is sitting on their own, which is very easy to do, 50-50 chance, or if a person's sitting with someone who really doesn't help them, or if you have someone in your class who just doesn't really get on with any people in the class, then it cuts off that discussion. And again, you can do group activities, but on the day-to-day working, unless you're a teacher who asks them to work in silence absolutely all the time, you want them helping each other, and it doesn't really promote that discussion. The last one I'm just going to discuss is a horseshoe. So what this is basically is 3 sides of a square around your classroom, and then you might have some tables in the middle, because no classroom really that I've seen has ever fit just one horseshoe and then that's it. This is supposed to, I think, promote just class discussion, that everyone's kind of facing each other, facing inwards. And as a teacher, you can kind of stand in that horseshoe and check everyone's work within the horseshoe. I've seen this done really well a couple of times, where the teacher has really wanted to go around as quickly as possible, because as a teacher, if you think in that middle bit, you can walk all the way around the people's work without necessarily having to look over their shoulder very, very quickly. So there's some really good kind of AFL advantages to that as a teacher. However, most rooms it's just not practical, there's not enough space, and you've got to put so many tables in the middle bit that it ultimately becomes a bit pointless. So those are a few things about the layout of the classroom. I hope you find those helpful. But now let's think about who to sit with whom. I think that's right. I'm not an English teacher. So the first thing you've got to think about is how much information do you have about the students. There's 2 places you should find information from: previous teachers and from their actual data, so SEN, ability data, etc. So the first one, if you can get their previous teacher, a teacher who's had them, very difficult for, say, year 7s in a secondary school on their first week. However, if you can get that information, sometimes when I have discussed with previous teachers, they say, oh, these 2 students work really well together. They weren't very good at the start of the year, but they found their kindred spirit in working. Brilliant, let's sit them together. I don't even think about it. Yep, they're going together. Sometimes you get information like, this person and this person really don't get on. Why would I bother having that fight again when I know that they don't get on? So, okay, brilliant, I'll separate them. So always start off with as much information as possible. The other data is up to you whether you use it, really. I would say definitely use the previous understanding of a teacher, obviously as long as it's from a reliable source, which it normally is. But the second one we're going to discuss about in a second. However, what happens if you don't know anything about the students? Well, you're going to have to do it randomly, literally randomly. There's advantages to do it alphabetical, because it's easy, and to be honest, I start learning their names a bit easier if I know whereabouts in the classroom they are. It's just a pattern. You can think, oh, hang on, they're probably going to be at the start of the alphabet. That's their name. Disadvantage to that, if you say if it's year 7 in secondary school, and there's not many feeder primary schools, they probably already sat in alphabetical order, or they might have already sat in alphabetical order in their primary school. So it's not necessarily muddle them up. And more importantly, probably a lot of their other teachers are going to do it alphabetical as well, which might be advantageous, it might be disadvantageous, if that's a word. So a different strategy is just do it completely randomly, just 100% randomly. The advantages of doing it randomly is that it is going to be unique to your class, so you're not going to be having the same ones across all their sets. The seating plan is going to be unique to your class, so the issues aren't going to be spilling over from maybe a different lesson, maybe, or whatever. So there's some good advantages in that. The other option, which I don't put as an option, however a lot of teachers do it, is let them sit where they want. I personally have never seen that work properly from a teacher who is a bit iffy with behaviour management. I've never seen that work. They know where they want to sit, they know who they want to sit next to, and it's a real shame because the students who really care about their education do want to sit with students they know they'll work really well with, who are at the same ability as them, and they really want to sit next to them, which is good, that's what we want. But equally, the students who are a bit disenfranchised and don't really want to work that much and actually want to sit and chat and muck about and maybe kind of test you as a teacher in your first week or so, will also sit together. So I would strongly advise you from lesson one not to let them sit where they want. A lot of schools now are forcing teachers to have seating plans, and for my money, that's a very, very good thing. Another strategy I've seen is boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl in obviously mixed schools. I don't really see any point in that. I really don't understand why people do that, but some teachers do that. So obviously they think that there's an advantage to that. So if you have data on them, such as ability data or behavioural records from last year or something like that, you might want to consider sitting them in ability. Now there's two ways of doing this. You can sit the most able and the least able together, and so the philosophy here is that the more able helps the least able at that topic, and you might do it for a subject as a whole. You might change seating plan depending on the topic, but the more able student helps the least able. So what I have done for some of my classes before is I've ranked them all by ability in maths, and I've put the most able with the least able, and then worked from there. And so you've got kind of middly people at the subject together. Now there is a massive drawback to that, and I'm going to talk about the alternative to see the drawback. The alternative to that is you seat the most able together, and so that they can help each other out. And then you obviously the third and fourth most able at that subject next to each other, and then you go from there. And so what you do as a teacher is you know exactly where in the classroom you need to go first, because you've got all the least able at that topic or at that subject together, which sounds really good. The difficulty is, as teachers, as we know, there's 30 students, and say it's an hour lesson, you've got 2 minutes a student, assuming that 100% of the lesson is spent on teaching. 2 minutes is not very, very long. It's not long at all. So what we need to do as teachers is to promote discussions between students so they can help each other out, because we do not have the time to go through every single student. We never have done, which is why we have a blackboard at the front and we don't go around and individually teach the students stuff. So there is a middle ground here, and this is what I do now with my classes. If you have your classroom set up into double desks, so 4 people to a row, which I do, if you see the most able, more able students in the middle, and then the least able students at the sides, then the more able can still help the less able, but also help each other. Now, this is something that came to me. I didn't nick this from someone else, which is rare for teachers, but it has worked brilliantly. And you've got to make some compromises, especially when it comes to the middle ability students. But then you've got a row of 4 middle ability students, and they should be able to be at each other's level and help each other out. And as a teacher, it's you're up to you to figure out, right, who needs help here. Where is the more able student not necessarily helping the less able student? So I need to make sure I go over to there. I've got a lot less students to help in that classroom than I have with all the other seating plans I've done before. Going on to the last thing I want to talk about on actually seating the students, you can do it on behaviour. Now the advantages of this is obviously if you've got 2 students who are really disenfranchised and really want to muck about, then the worst thing you can do is sit them together. Maybe. Now I say maybe because if you sit them together as a teacher, I've got 2 really disenfranchised students, and at that moment in time they don't want to play ball. If I sit them together, not necessarily next to each other but near each other, I only need to look at one area. There's only one area that I need to focus on and to be over there and motivate them and try and get them back on track. If I sit them opposite sides of the classroom to each other, then the temptation is they can talk across the classroom. So why would I put myself in that position? Now I've worked with teachers before who've had 4 or 5 students that they deem really poorly behaved, which I agree with them on. However, what they do is they sit them in all 4 corners of the classroom. Well, then as a class, there's no safe place. There's no area that students can work. Now if you sit the 4 together, then as a teacher you can focus on those 4, you can keep an eye constantly on those 4. Again, we're not going to talk about behaviour management in this video, but the rest of the class, the other 3 corners, can get on with their work whilst you're dealing with that. So there are advantages, just that's my point. Now the last thing I want to discuss in this a very, very long video, unfortunately it was only supposed to be a short one, is what happens if you want to change your seating plan, or what happens if a student asks you to change it. So first of all, we're going to talk about what happens if a student asks you to change it. Now, I've heard some of the most inspiring speeches about how I need to change my seating plan, especially normally like in the first week. Some of those have been bang on, student being absolutely in the right, and there's sometimes there's something going on to the system at the end of the week about how this person is being bullied by someone else, etc. Whatever it is, and they're absolutely in the right, and I say to them, and normally I can tell, and I think it comes with experience, I go, brilliant, okay. The other type of student comes to me, which is by far the majority, is just whining. They don't like it. Oh, I don't want to do that, whatever. I don't care. I make it clear to them I move no one. Unless there's some reason I have to, and I make that clear to everyone, because obviously if I move someone, I say I have moved that person, and I might move other people. But if someone comes to me and says, oh, I don't like it, I don't care, like, I'm sorry, but my seating plans are final. But I also say, come and talk to me, you know, if you're having concerns, come and talk to me at lunch, come and talk to me after school. And that's my first port of call. I do not move the seating plan. I don't promise I'm going to move the seating plan. I don't do any of that. Almost every single student does not come back to me at lunchtime after school. In their time, they don't do it. The ones generally, and again, this is how I can tell on some of them, the ones who really do have a reason come back to me then. But the vast majority of the ones who just want to moan at the end of lesson, they don't bother coming back to me. That doesn't guarantee that there's not bigger issues, and normally I hope that the parent or pastoral team in the school will come and tell me, and as soon as a pastoral person, or sometimes with parents, sometimes I'm a bit more malleable with it. But most students won't come back in their own time to deal with it. Talking more generally about seating plans, I do not change my seating plans without a very, very good reason. I like to have one seating plan for the year. I'll make tweaks. I'll move a few people in there, you know, obviously with the things we discussed earlier, or just things I don't feel that some students are working very well, and I need to roll the dice a bit, and I need to get some change in there. Maybe dynamics are not quite right with a couple of people, whatever. So I just make some changes in the year, but as a rule I don't change them. I don't ever start from scratch. The only reason you should start from scratch is if you've got it completely wrong, or you've completely lost the class behaviourally, and through advice from a mentor, someone in school, or pastoral, or your head of department, they've suggested, look, we've got to start again. We need a fresh start. There needs to be a bit of a reset. Completely understand changing seating plan under those situations, but then that seating plan has to stick. You only get one fresh start with a group, and I can't think of any reason why you would ever change it after that. So once you've locked in a seating plan, that's it. Tweak it, but don't ever have sweeping changes. Right, we're going to start from scratch, unless there's a very good reason. Well, I hope that's been useful. There's probably been a whole host of things I've missed out. So if you want to make any comments about anything I've said, has any of it been useful? Have you got your own suggestions? We're going to be doing a video soon on the channel about all the questions that you have, maybe just one question that warrants its own video, or maybe just a whole load of smaller questions to follow up the videos that have been this week. Remember, these videos are 5 o'clock every single Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday, without fail, hopefully. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you've liked it, please click like. If you want to see more from us, please click subscribe. Thank you.